All right, finally. That was much harder than I think it's supposed to be. I restarted everything and it finally went live. Before I just hit the button, nothing happened. Although I can't really complain because it's amazing that technology works at all. If you really think about what's going on here, it's a marvel. So I was going to give people a few minutes to get in here, but it looks like we've got 8. I kind of consider that quorum. So I guess I'll just kind of dive into stuff. So I was actually kind of surprised no one had asked in the channel what I was working on, but thanks to Lag Lawyer, that looks a lot like Lockpicking Lawyer with the yellow symbol, I can talk about that. So I'm sitting at what looks like a clean bench, but if I rotate the computer slightly, you'll see that it's an absolute mess. And that's because I'm super deep into my current project, which is, I don't have anything to really show. It's all upstairs on the electronics bench because I'm going through sort of integration hell right now. But the general idea is, imagine that you had a cue for a pool table where you can roughly aim it at a ball for a shot that you want to make, pull a trigger, and then the tip of the cue will adjust with whatever adjustments it needs to do to hit the ball to make whatever you want to happen, whether that's sinking a particular ball, potentially sinking multiple balls in a really amazing way. So it's a form of robot human augmentation, which is something that I find particularly interesting because humans are good at stuff, robots are good at stuff, but when you put them together, you can make some things happen that are just not really possible otherwise. And so this is a cool version of that. And then the other reason why this project is really neat is that a billiards table is kind of an ideal physical thing. Like, it's round balls on a flat level plane with really, really good elastic interactions. So I think it will be possible to do some particularly cool looking stuff just because it's easier than dealing with basketballs flying through the air and some of the other things that I've done. And so my overall goal is to see how many balls I can sink with a single shot. And I'm feeling pretty good that I'll be able to do 2, but I'm hoping maybe 3 or 4 in some cases. It can be that accurate. And then I have a 6 Degree of Freedom robot arm coming in from Tormach. I think they're shipping it out next week. So hopefully I'll have it within the next 2 weeks. And it's a pretty awesome arm. And one of the things I want to do is maybe either have that hold the pull cue as well, which is a bit superfluous because there's 6 degrees of freedom on the cue and then there's 6 degrees of freedom on the arm. So it's a bit overkill, but it may allow me to be more precise and do more cool things. And I was also considering maybe having a robot arm versus me with the robot cue match or something, just to see which is better, which could be fun. But that's what I'm working on. I have the cue basically built. It's moving around. The main issues I'm running into now are the math for if I want to command it to move the tip, I guess I've posted some pictures on the channel, but the tip is it's a Stewart platform. You can look that up, but it's 6 linear actuators that can move a thing around in all translational and rotational directions. And I thought the inverse kinematics were going to be easy, but they're actually kind of hard. So I'm struggling with that right now. And then there's computer vision I'm using a Microsoft Azure Connect. And then I'm also using a projector to show me where I need to guide me to where I need to hold the stick. So I have to write all that software. That's where I'm at right now. And I think it's going to work. I did some bench testing. It's pneumatically actuated to hit the ball. So it seems like it should be able to work. That's what I'm working on now. And then what's coming next, it's basically almost certainly going to be one of the more useful projects. This project is fun, but this whole time that I'm working on it, I feel like I'm kind of wasting my time. Like it's fun, it's interesting. People are hopefully going to learn some stuff, and it's going to accomplish a lot of my goals for the channel. But I feel like I could also be delivering useful results to humanity. And so like it's really sort of eating away at me that I'm doing something that's interesting but ultimately pointless. And so next project almost certainly going to be something that's useful. I think that's really important. So it's kind of that. If you have specific questions, of course, if you want to know more about something I've said, just put it in the chat. So I printed out all the questions that are in the channel. I'm just going to go through them like I normally do, and hopefully it'll be interesting. So these are, I think, reverse chronological. Oh, all right. Before I go into that, so do I have a useful project in view? I do. I need to do more research and simulation, and I don't want to share too many details because it's a little early. But I think the problem that I'm going to attempt to make some progress on is developing a communication system that results in constructive civil discourse on the internet. I think that the current state of communication on the internet is one of the biggest problems in the US today. And I think that real life, when people talk to each other, there are some things that cause it to self-regulate. Like it doesn't explode the way that it does online automatically. And there's some other aspects that I think are really important that between real world and in online world. And so I'm going to be attempting to see if I can demonstrate a way to have a self-regulating system of communication that results in civil conversations that doesn't require top-down censorship or whatever you want to call it, deplatforming. Because even with that, the communication online is not civil in most cases. So you may have noticed I'm saying a lot more philosophical stuff on the Discord server. It's because I've been digging into some of the philosophy in my free time to try to understand some of these things and social contracts and what makes people tick. So that's what I hope to make some progress on. We'll see if it happens. It's unlikely it'll have a big impact, but hopefully it'll demonstrate that it's possible. That's my goal. And it would be a software-only project, which checks off another one of my goals as well. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people about this in real life at length. I have an enormous amount of thoughts on the matter. I am really excited to both explore the system, but then also philosophically talk about it as well. So this is one that's like, I can't wait to get to this because I just see so much potential. It's gonna be really cool, I think. Or a total failure. It's really gonna come down to if I can design the system that does that. All right, so block humans, sure. There's, yeah, I'm gonna go. I could talk about this for the whole hour, but I need to refine the ideas more before I broadcast them because I don't have solidified views. I just have a lot of thoughts that I hope will solidify into a useful thing. And I'll be sharing more as I go. So this is one of the things where it's unlikely. I don't think it's possible for me to do anything in a vacuum. And so I'll be sharing more and soliciting input when I have concrete ideas. What books am I reading? I've been reading, there's some old books like The Social Contract, which is more about people in the government, but it's interesting. I've been reading a lot of like books that explain problems with social media. So like there's a book, it's not really a textbook, but there's a book called Hate Inc., which digs into how systems are creating division. I've been reading a lot of internet stuff as well. There's a lot of short things on addiction and other patterns. I'm not super deep into it yet, but it's very interesting. So Do I use social media? No. I recognized, so I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I haven't used them for probably a decade. I noticed that there were a lot of anti-patterns related to how I thought and how I spent my time. And it's not just social media, it's also news, things like Reddit, where I was never bored. I like the second I would get into line somewhere or literally walking down the hall, I would pull out my phone and like look at something. And I realized that the fact that I was never bored meant that I was missing out on something. I realized that a lot of my greatest career, personal life changes came from sort of introspective thought and processing, and then a change resulting from that. And when I would just look at social media or news or things like that, that wouldn't happen. And so I basically cut it all out. Like I look at a weekly digest of the top news, and I subscribe to some lower frequency periodicals and magazines that come out once a month. And then sometimes I'll sometimes look at Reddit and stuff, but very, very rarely, because I didn't get anything out of it. And things like a career change, it's very easy to just put up with a situation that you're not actually happy with, because whenever you're not happy, you can just like go get a little mental kick from looking at the news or something like that. But it's I don't know. I didn't find it healthy. Some people are better at it than others too, for mediating it. For me, it was a problem. But that's a different aspect. So that's more like there's a documentary, The Social Dilemma of Addiction and things like that. That's part of it. But I think the bigger problem that I'm interested in is actual interactions between people who have differing viewpoints. And the fact that I can talk to someone who has a differing viewpoint from me in real life, and it's actually mostly civil, and there's certain things that we do that keep it from running away and exploding, which don't happen online. So even if people are addicted to social media, I think the interactions that happen could be better. So that's what I'm most interested in. Okay, yeah, and I'll certainly be talking more about it. I bet there's a lot of interest in this, and this isn't the end of it. I like I said, I'm in the beginning. I read Hacker News. There's a online tool I use called HN Digest, which you can subscribe to get the top N stories at a desired frequency. So I get the top, I think, 20 stories once a week, and I look at those. Because even Hacker News, you can just, there's just constantly new, there's constant novelty. Like if I'm bored, I can just look at Hacker News, which for me, I'm not actually really getting anything out of that. I want to stay informed, but like just constantly reading little blurbs and comments just doesn't really edify me. So that's why I do the once a week. The conversation is quite civil. It is one of the better communities, but it is extremely heavily moderated, which doesn't scale. And as it's grown, I've followed Hacker News for probably over 10 years now. As it's grown, it has gotten bigger and there has been more issues. So yeah. All right. Questions from the Discord. So what aspect of robot design do most people get wrong? So I'm not a robotics expert. I've built a few robots. I focused on robotics as one of my concentrations for computer science. So a lot of my theoretical robotics knowledge is coming from the computer science side. My day job building 3D printers is basically building robots, but I don't claim to have a holistic view of robotics. But there are some patterns that I have seen that I think are, in computer science, you'd call it an anti-pattern. It's a thing where people repeatedly do a thing that isn't the right way to do it. It's like destructive or something. It's low. The ROI is bad. And so one thing that I've seen a lot in robotics is that people, they tend to focus on, not tend to, they often try to make a thing that is comparable to a human. So this might be trying to replicate a hand, or making robots that can walk, or just generally operate like a human. And the thing is, humans are incredible multi-capable general purpose machines, but they're also incredibly complicated. And for the problem at hand, replicating the behavior of a human may not be the most tractable, shortest path to solving your problem. As an example, a Roomba, it's a two-wheeled puck that can drive around and suck up dirt. Imagine if I tried to build a biped robot that can sweep with a mop and bucket, or use a human vacuum. Like, that's going to be way more expensive, way slower, just worse in probably every way except for looking cool. And so, like, when it comes to robotic grippers and manipulating this, I see a lot of this. Maybe it's just the stuff that gets the press, but I think that's a mistake. As another real world example, so Amazon Robotics, they were Kiva systems before, and before Amazon bought them. And the general way that the machines worked, at least when it was Kiva, they probably developed more stuff, but they would go and retrieve a column of goods and bring it to a human to pull the thing out and put into a box. And so you could have a vast warehouse of shelves with stuff in it that were robotically retrieved and put away to bring the goods for people to pick out and put in. And this is a good way to do it, because navigating a labyrinth and grabbing a pillar is something that a robot can do really easily, and then picking a million different items off a shelf is something that a human can do that is notoriously difficult for robots to do. And so that's a human-robot augmentation, where you have a human doing the thing that a human can do, and you have a robot doing the thing that a robot can do better than a human, or more cheaply, or whatever metric you're using. So that's really good. And I think more of that is useful. And that's why I like human-robot augmentation for a lot of my projects. Is it's really cool when you add the two together. Like, when a robot can do something a lot more accurately or fast than I can, but then I can do a thing that it can't do, like walk around a room anywhere or whatever. Combine those, you can do unique, new, cool things. So that's one aspect. Another really common thing is using too many degrees of freedom, which is sort of related to the human thing, but I'll see where someone will develop a robot. This is a totally made up example, but say someone develops a robot to take pizza dough, put it into a pizza oven, let it cook, take the pizza dough out of the oven, and then put it onto a shelf. People will use a 6 degree of freedom robot arm to do this. And when you actually think about the problem, there's no 6 degrees of freedom required. Like, you don't need to rotate the pizza around a wrist. You don't need to tilt it front and back, probably. And so the optimal robot for that, if you're going to make a lot of them, is probably something that's just a one-dimensional track with a thing that can move in and out, right, to do the stuff. You might need to go up and down to put it on different shelves. And so that's 2 or 3 degrees of freedom, which is a lot simpler, a lot easier to make, and a lot cheaper. And that's a thing I see people doing a lot. Of course, I'm about to get a 6 degree of freedom robot arm, and I'm going to commit this sin for sure, because it's awesome. I totally understand why it's cool, but I think it makes some products that could be more economical less economical, especially for the robot tending stuff. And then the other thing, the pizza gripper, they'll make it like a hand. Why is it a hand? It could be, make the pizza tray and the thing interlock in a easy to make way. You don't need a hand. And then two other quick ones, and I'll not spend too long on this one, I guess, is that people will make robots that only work in extremely special cases. I see this a lot in academic robots, where it demonstrates a cool thing, and this might be the right path to developing the research, but it only works in a very specific case. Like the robot can only pick up a sphere on a black table that's perfectly level or whatever. And if you actually want to apply that research, it just doesn't work. And so I feel like some robotic demonstrations are disingenuous because they lead you to believe it can do something that it really can't. And then the last thing is people making household robots that are not good. So Roombas are neat, but like iRobot tried to make a gutter cleaning robot that you'll use once a year. That was a failure. People trying to make this robot that can move around and like push a broom or like bring you a beer. It's just they're expensive and they're not worth it. Or that robot that's basically a cart with two wheels that follows you. I don't remember what it's called, but it's basically the equivalent of a little cart that you push, but it's like $10,000. I think it's made by Vespa, the scooter company. Those are some of the patterns. There's probably lots of others. There's a lot of good stuff happening in robotics. One of my favorite examples of a robotic thing, there's actually two. One is less robotic than the other, but at McDonald's, they have a robot just for filling your soda. If you've ever gone through the drive-through, they have it's basically a tank tread that holds many cups at the different lengths. And when you place your order, it like indexes a cup in, fills with the right soda, and then brings it out for the person to give to you. And it's like a really simple robot, but it probably saves all kinds of money from people under or overfilling, needing to stand there. It's a nice robot that solves a problem that doesn't solve every problem. I bet there's a lot of stuff like that in the world where you can make it better without having to solve the hard whole thing. So that's kind of what I think. Another question. Yeah, Boston Dynamics. I mean, they finally sell a thing, which is cool. I think the robots are awesome. They do incredible engineering, and they now have a product. I don't know if it's successful or not, the Spot. I haven't really heard much. The dancing is cool. I hope it turns into something useful. Otherwise, it would have been a lot of really good engineers spending decades for not. That's kind of why I make YouTube videos and want to do some useful stuff, because I don't want to just develop stuff that I throw away. It doesn't make me happy. Another question was about the podcast. So this is something that I sort of soft committed to, saying I was going to do. It's something that I really want to do, actually. The general idea is it's a way to share more information without the commitment of making a whole video. The commitment of making a video is really high. The almost every video has taken me at least 300 hours, probably, if not more. And a big chunk of that time is just the editing. It's just compiling all that information, distilling it down into a dense little nugget it's really expensive. And so if just talking is easier, like I'm just talking here, if I had a few points I wanted to flesh out about a project, even if I had to do a little bit of prep, it's a lot easier to edit audio. There's no visuals, and I might be able to just share more, which is something that I'm pretty passionate about. My main limiter so far has just been time. So one of the other questions is if I'm doing YouTube full time, which I am. I have been for about 2 months now. And my main goal has been to demonstrate that I can do this sustainably, break even, and not go bankrupt. And I'm finally there, and I have a little bit more time. So hopefully I'll be able to do a podcast sometime, but I don't have like a specific planned date. The other thing I need to figure out for the podcast is who it's for. There's like how deep I go and what content I cover has a big, it's impacted a lot, or that majorly impacts who will watch it. And so I want to make sure I'm hitting the right audience. Like I don't want to make a random podcast and then get some people listening and then change it wildly. So more thought required. But of course it will evolve. I mean, the channel's evolved, and that there's nothing wrong with that. So I want to do it. I'm going to do it, but I don't know when I'm going to do it. So another question is, when did I make my CNC machine? What did I build? What did I buy? Sorry, I'm reading the questions. I'll get to those in a minute. So yeah, I have a little CNC machine over here. It's this thingy. I would roam over there with a camera if I could have gotten the streaming thing working, but I couldn't. And so I built that, I think, in 2016. There's a little, the generic name for the mill inside of it is a Sieg X2. That's actually sold by Micro Mark, which they call it the Micro Lux Mini Mill, but it's basically the same castings as the Sieg X2. And so that I had that little mill probably since 2009 or 2010. And it's just a little tiny milling machine. So that was the main thing that existed. And then all the rest of it, I designed and built the parts for. So all the motor mounts, all that stuff is designed. There's kits you can buy, but I thought they were terrible. They either exposed the lead screws to chips, or they were just really expensive for what they were. So I designed it all to be machined out of 3/8 and 1/2 inch plate, just to save cost and machining time. And then I built the enclosure from sheet metal because I really wanted to use flood coolant. One of the things you'll hear me say a lot is that for me, the purpose of a CNC machine is, one, to be able to make things that I can't make on a manual mill, but two, to save me time. And if I would stand there and babysit the thing while it's machining, it's not saving me time. And so flood coolant is a way to more reliably be able to leave the machine and it won't get jammed up with chips and break the tools. And so flood coolant was pretty important. And I designed that to be used in a small apartment. I was in a 900 square foot apartment, so that was in there with me. And it was a little stinky, but oh yeah, the Corona. I'm more partial to Corona ever since the pandemic. It just feels appropriate. But yeah, so I used it for a number of years. It was good. It's a little small, but is a great project. That's actually where I learned most of my CNC knowledge. I was pretty firmly a manual machinist for years and years before that. That's what I learned in school. It's the machine I had. That's where I learned all the other aspects of it. I'm really happy with that project. It was great. I highly recommend it if you want to get into CNC. Building a CNC, you'll come out with a lot more knowledge than you would otherwise. Let me see, what would I do different if I made it again? So the biggest thing I would do different if I made it again is I would have used a bigger mill to start with. So I used the mill that I had, and I wanted a small mill because I was going to go in an apartment, but without a doubt, the biggest limiter of that machine was just the size and weight of the mill. If it was just a few inches bigger on each dimension with a little bit more horsepower, I might not have even gotten the Tormach. Like the amount of cut I could take in steel, the rate that I could remove material, both due to the machine vibrating and due to limited horsepower, it was just such a pain. And so if you're going to build one, put as big of a machine in the center of it as you can. That dictates the capabilities. The bigger and heavier and more horsepower it has, the more you can do with it. So yeah, a couple $100. I mean, I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours building this thing, thousands of dollars. If I should have spent a few hundred more on the mill, then I would have had a wildly better machine. So that's my biggest regret. Other than that, it's been great. I regretted the design of the flood. I made a video about it. I improved that. But otherwise, it's solid. All right. Have I thought about getting an assistant to help? I have. I've been putting it off because for one, I've been trying to minimize cost because I want to show that I could do this for my job, and I want to understand the cash flow and all of that. But also, my goal isn't to produce the most things that I can. I actually wrote some of this down. There's a question that someone asked about this, which is, where is it? Yeah, do I have concrete plans or ideas where I want to take the channel? I put a bunch of work in myself. Is there a way to do it without me putting 100+ hour weeks? And so, like, when I think about hiring employees, it kind of comes down to my goals. So for background, I was an engineering manager for quite a while. I had, at its peak, I was managing about 70 people. So that was both direct reports, engineering managers, and engineering directors managing engineering managers. So I've kind of done a lot of management, and I feel very confident that I could just like take 5 people and then produce maybe not 5 times as much stuff, but I could produce a lot more quickly than I'm able to now. But my overall goal isn't to make the most things or get the most views or anything like that. And when I sat down to start a channel, I mean, at first I wanted to see if I could even do it. But once I saw that I was starting to have some success, I was trying to define what are my explicit goals here. And so, number one, I want to make sure I can provide for me and my family. If I can't do that, then I can't do it. So that was priority number one. And then the reason I make the videos is, one, I enjoy it. So I want to have fun doing it. If I'm not having fun, then I'm not going to make good things. Like, if I'm hating it, there's no way there's going to be good humor in the video. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be soulless. And so it's bad for me, and it's bad for anyone who might watch my videos. So I need to enjoy it. And then I want to have an impact. So I want to make videos that have a positive impact on the world. And the way I measure impact is very, very roughly, it's number of people who view the thing multiplied by the amount of change that comes from someone viewing the thing. And so if I were to make a video that's just garbage, soulless, but gets a lot of views, I would consider it a loss, and that would not make me happy. So I'm definitely not optimizing for views. I want quality things that result in change. Hopefully it's people being more curious about engineering, becoming engineers, making things. That's kind of the way that I think my videos have impact. And so they need to be good, and they need to be inspiring. And so I've been hesitant to hire people because I don't want to lose the spark, and I don't want it to become me running a business. And that's what I would do if I was trying to maximize views or revenue or something like that. That's not my goal. I need money to make stuff. I appreciate the patronage. It helps a lot, but my goal isn't to become rich or something like that. It just doesn't make me happy. And then, so I've been holding off for those reasons. My number one plan, like my concrete plan for 2021, is I want to branch out. I want to, like I've been saying, I want to make a set of things that I do actual concrete value for humanity, like things that either I turn into a product or I freely give away for someone else to turn into a product. I think I can do that while making videos that are entertaining. I get to double dip. And I think once I start doing that, I have a mission that is aligned well with my interests, things that give me joy and aren't going to turn into a slippery slope. I think that's the point where I would hire an employee, because the work will increase to an extent that there's no feasible way for me to do it. And it makes sense in context of the mission. So if I need to communicate with a lot of people who might be trying to commercialize an idea that I showed a concept for, if I need to maintain open source repositories, if I was building a software application that needs to be developed and maintained, I can't do that and make videos. That's the point where I think I'd hire employees. And so my basically, tentative plan is demonstrate that it's possible to have what is effectively a nonprofit company whose goal is to essentially give away valuable things to humanity. And I can make enough doing that to hire a person, and then hire someone. So that's a lot of words, but I think it makes sense. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about it. And it's kind of like nonprofit giving away funded by YouTube videos. That's kind of the scheme, and that's where I'd really like to get to. We'll see if I can. Remains to be seen. I hope it can. Ooh, lots and lots of questions. Where do I buy raw materials? It depends. So there's a chain in the US called Metal Supermarkets. They ship stuff online, but they have a lot of local branches. There's one right by me. And you can go down there and they have the material on hand. They'll cut it to length or whatever you need. And it's actually quite a bit cheaper than buying steel or aluminum online and having it shipped to you. It's actually cheaper than buying from their online site. If you look at their online site, it's quite expensive, especially for sheet metal and stuff like that. But if you go to their store, it's pretty cheap. So I use them. I will sometimes use online metals for stuff that they don't have. Sometimes they'll have a better price, even with it being shipped to you. And then for a lot of these smaller projects like this billiards cue, I realize that I need a particular thing and I need it today. I'll get it from McMaster. I do pay a premium and the shipping is annoying, but like if I just need a foot of aluminum 1-inch round or something like that, I'll usually just get it from them because the time it takes me to drive to Metal Supermarkets and back, it's just better to buy from McMaster. Those are the 3 places typically. What did my wife think about YouTube? She's a remarkably supportive wife. She really liked the idea, one, because she saw that it played to my strengths. I'm always building stuff anyway, and so if I could do that and then make money doing it, then that's great. And then the other thing is, if I'm doing it from the house, and I could spend more time with her and with my daughter, which she's very happy about. So she's pretty happy about it. She had some trepidation about being in the videos. I had a vision of the first video where the basketball hoop made fun of her. It's like there can be a really good thing, like you can add kind of another dimension. And I was hoping that she would basically be a vehicle to make fun of me, because I feel like that's important. And but then, it goes both ways. So that's kind of what led to her being the first one. And she thought it was funny and people thought it was funny, and then she didn't care anymore. But getting her to appear the first time was actually quite difficult. Top 3 candidates in the running for open source projects. There's another iteration on the blind vision thing. I already have a proof of concept. There's been quite a bit of interest in it. I've actually been contacted by Intel is doing something similar. They're interested in it. There's a Center for Research for the Blind in Japan that's very interested in the work, and then some other companies as well. So even if I don't really want to open source what I had, because it was a hack. Like I don't think it's a good starting point for someone to build on top of. It's a terrible foundation. The way I designed the mechanism is not the right way to do it. I did it because I thought it was intellectually interesting, not because I think it's the right way to design that mechanism. Lots of problems with it. Like I probably wouldn't have chosen the 3x4 resolution for the finger sensors if I was really trying to make something useful. So that's one where I would be interested in taking another pass to flesh out the ideas in such a way that I think it's a more proper foundation for someone else to actually take and do stuff with. So that I think would be a worthwhile one. There's any research related to communication online. That's my number 1 right now, both because I think I have some good ideas and I think it's a huge problem. And what a lot of people would say to me, I think, is, well, you're a fool. Why do you possibly think, with all the resources of Google and Twitter and all these companies, why do you think that you, as a single man, could possibly make any progress on this problem? And my answer there is that those companies are for profit. And I think if you look at it economically, you should never expect a for-profit company to solve these problems, because the problems are, I think solving these problems massively hurts their profits. That's my theory. I'll flesh it out more in my video. I would not expect them to solve these problems. That's why I have hope. That's why I'm naively optimistic that I can at least demonstrate something. I don't think it's impossible. Number 3, I don't really have. There's a bunch of projects people have sent me. I've been compiling them. There's tons of different stuff. I don't have like a firm number 3, but there are lots of options, from things like baby walkers that can't go downstairs to ways of disabling someone who's attacking you without killing them, which is another big social problem. There's a lot of different things. So definitely more stuff than time, which begs the question of hiring, but I'm hopefully getting to that bridge soon. Let's see. There's so many questions. I don't know if there's no way I'm going to get to all of these. I might have to have a part 2 or something. I was really happy. Oh, let me answer the question that I missed, because I only had 95% hit rate. So where is it? Okay, here we go. How long before I post my first video did I think about starting a YouTube channel? This is I don't know when I missed this, but I did, and it's embarrassing, because I thought I would have told you I answered all the questions, and I didn't. So if you go in the Wayback Machine and you know where to look, you will see that I've been publishing the project that I work on for at least 15 years, if not longer. I've sort of had my whole life, I've had kind of a innate belief in open source, where not necessarily open source software, but the sharing what you're doing so that people can benefit from it is something I've always been interested in. So I've had, before blogs, I had websites that I built that detailed my projects. I've had blogs. I had a bunch of different stuff. And there's a dark age period where I didn't publish anything because I was too busy at work, which is a shame. And probably 5 or 6 years ago, I got really interested in starting a YouTube channel. And I started to accumulate the basic gear that I would need to do it: camera, microphone, a couple of small lights. I had a couple false starts where I started documented projects several years ago, and just between work and living in a tiny apartment, it was too hard to do. It was just not happening. And that was actually one of my goals with getting this house that I'm in now, was to have enough of a shop that not only can I have the tools and really double down on building these projects, but also a workspace where I can film them and share them. Like that was one of my inputs to getting the house. And I got really serious about it in 2018. I filmed about half of a video about making a 6 Degree of Freedom motion simulator, which I didn't build because it was too expensive. It turns out I got halfway through showing the math for the motors and the actuators and all that stuff, and the optimal arrangement and all that. Is a terrible video. But again, cost and work stopped me. And then I finally, and whenever I started, March or April, whenever it was this year, I was like, all right, I've got an easy thing I want to do: sheet metal forming. Most of the work will actually be making a video. I'm going to do it. And so I did it. So it was a long time coming. And if anyone wants to make videos, it's not that hard. It's a lot of work. It's a big commitment. You have to really want to do it. But it's my recommendation would be to find a project that is something you can do very easily, that's not a stretch from if it's a project, I mean, it could be a video about anything, but if it's a project video, choose a project that isn't a stretch, that's simple. That way you can focus on filming it and the editing and all of the storytelling side of it, because that's where all the new stuff is. And you can go through that whole process with in a pretty short amount of time. My first video, I think I started the project, filmed it, edited it in like 2 days. It was a very quick thing. And then my other piece of advice is just don't overthink it and try to make a perfect video the first time. Usually a lot of the lessons you learn too late. Like you'll learn, oh man, if I had just shot this a different way, I could show this thing a lot better. But you've already shot the thing. So you can either just go with it and publish the video and then do it better the next time and learn other lessons along the way, or you can go back and redo it. But you can just do that forever on one video, which could work, but you miss out on the public feedback and also the reward of publishing. So don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough, and iterate and try not to shoot too high. If I had tried to make one of the more complicated videos, like one of these basketball hoops or whatever, or this pool cue, the project itself is so hard, I would have totally failed to film it correctly. And then when I went to edit, there's just no way I could have told a good story. So, start small, build up from there. That's what worked for me, at least. Can I afford to hire someone? The Patreon has not reached that level. The Patreon probably is like, it's less than a third of my salary when I quit my job. I make money off the sponsorships and ads as well. Those things together, I think I could afford to hire someone, but I would need to produce more to really make it a sustainable thing. But if you hire someone, you can produce more. So that's what I've been trying to feel. The interesting thing about the revenue from YouTube in particular is that the Patreon is just monthly. Some people have patrons that are per video and stuff like that, but for me, I thought it was simpler to just do monthly. But if I make 2 videos, I basically double revenue from sponsorships and ads on the video. So if a single video was enough to pay me enough to live and support family, if I make 2 videos with the help of someone else, then that second video could support them. So I think that could work, but I need to I need to show that I can do it consistently. Like what I'm afraid of is that YouTube no longer likes me and I get no views and then I have to fire someone. I really don't want to get in that situation. So I've been playing it safe. When it comes to finances, I usually have plan A, plan B, and plan C, because I think that's really important. Usually plan A is a bit riskier, but I have a fallback, and then I usually have a fallback from that fallback. And so I'm not quite at the confidence level to hire anyone, even if I theoretically could. My long-term goals, I don't see myself doing YouTube until retirement for sure. I enjoy doing YouTube. I think it's very fun. I think it's a great way to share. I could see it being a thing that I do as a aside for a long time. I don't see it being my career for the long run. My actual hope is that YouTube will turn into something that I make will be something that I am wildly passionate about and that I think is worthwhile and worth putting a lot more of my time into. So at some point, I hope that I'll have a thing that I want to devote more time into making a legitimate, real product, service, whatever that is, and I'll focus on that, and then I'll become career B. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know, but that's what I'm hoping will happen, and it's again a way to multiply the impact. I think the impact the videos have is generally positive, but there may be more, like per unit time that I put into a thing, shipping some kind of good service product that benefits people might actually be higher ROI use of my time. It has to be something that I firmly believe in for me to do it. Otherwise, I just won't be able to muster the time and energy to do it. Because if you really want it, I come from the startup world. If you really want to realize something like this, especially something that's new and different and people don't understand, you have to commit yourself to it. Like that becomes your life. So none of the stuff I've made matches that bar. That's why I'm not doing a Kickstarter for any of my basketball hoops or anything like that. I don't think the world needs them. I don't think they're very valuable, and I'm certainly not passionate enough about them to devote my life to realizing them. So it's kind of how I think about it. Do I ever get the feeling that I'm under pressure to keep pushing out videos, maintaining the flow? There's self-generated pressure for sure. I talked about plan A, plan B, plan C. This is something I was very scared of before I was going to go and do this full time. And so I saved the vast amount of my money. And I have enough that I can, there's no like, my runway, to use startup terminology, isn't very short. Like I could probably not produce a video for a year and I'd be okay. And so that's really important, because what I don't want is for commitments to change the decisions that I make. So like say I had quit and I did YouTube and I had enough money for 1 month, then I have to produce. Like I'm going to go bankrupt if I don't produce, and everything I have to do has to be a success. That will cause me to, one, have a lot of stress about producing and going bankrupt. Two, it'll make me play it safe and only do things that are safe bets, because they have to be. And that will turn into me not having fun, not doing things that I want, and not taking risks. And so it was really important to be able to take those risks and not have that stress. So I set things up and massively reduced expenses and stuff so that I would be sustainable and I could take some risk without it being devastating. So that's my plan B kind of thing in place. So plan A is I do this and grow it and it's successful and sustaining. Plan B is it's okay, I can tap into my savings. Plan C is I go get a real job, which I should be able to do if I want to. So that's my 3-tiered strategy in that case. And I apply that to a lot of stuff. And they're decreasing levels of risk, but also kind of decreasing levels of reward as well. I don't know if that makes total sense, but what I don't want is the pressure to produce. Like that, you will make different decisions, and I do not want to make stuff just to make stuff. It's just, I don't know. Like a video that let me put it this way. A video that I make, the total amount of human time spent watching it is usually at least 1 to 200 person years. So when I release a video, it's like deleting 3 or 4, probably 5, like to the amount of time spent watching one of my videos is equivalent to someone watching it 24 hours a day for 1 to 200 years, which corresponds to probably someone who actually sleeps, and say they're watching it 8 hours a day, then that's 700 years. So that's like 10, it's like absorbing 10 humans worth of total lifetime attention in one video. Which, when I think about it that way, it's imperative that the video isn't wasting that time. Like if 7 human lives worth of attention are going to go into a video, it needs to be good. Like I don't know, the common good weighs heavily on me, and I really don't want to make a thing that wastes 7 lifetimes of attention. Like that just feels like such a monumental waste. And so I don't know, I'm getting like philosophical here, but everything I do, I want to make sure it's net positive, not just for me, but for the world. And so I don't want to get in a situation where I'm making trash content. I don't want external pressures to make me do things that I don't think I should do, because that will make me deeply unhappy. That's kind of how I think about it. So we'll see where it goes. I mean, it's something I think about a lot. It's still just me, but we'll see. When did I join Formlabs? So you can actually, if you go to my website, shane.engineer, there's a post from a few years ago talking about how I got hired there. I joined them in 2012. They had been around for 8 months, maybe, roughly, when I joined. And I applied for, I don't remember what the job was. It was, I think, computational geometrist or computational algorithm developer, something like that. The gist of the job was develop 3D printing algorithms for the machines. So all the tool pathing. So given a 3D mesh, generate all the movements that the machine needs to do to realize that part physically. Generate the support structures, a method to automatically orient the parts for maximum success, minimum time, maximum quality, all those kinds of things, et cetera, et cetera. So it was the computational geometric algorithmic side of the thing. And I applied for that. No one said anything to me. And so I really wanted to work there. Like, I saw the machines that they were making. I was developing rep wraps for several years before I worked there. I firmly believed in 3D printing as a legitimately useful thing. Like, I was getting a lot of value of it. It seems really useful and like a good thing. And I saw the machine that they made when they published their Kickstarter, and my internal engineer sense was like, this thing's good. These people are good. This is solid. I want to work with these people. And so I basically made up my mind that I was going to find a way into that company, because I needed to work there, because it was the best company I could see. And so what I did is I concluded, all right, they saw my resume and my cover letter. That didn't get their attention. I need to get their attention. I need to show them that I have what they want and what they're looking for. If I give them a unmistakable confirmation of that, then they should hire me, right? And so what I did is I watched they had this like video on YouTube or somewhere that was like someone holding a camera showing their beta software that they had developed, and it showed the different functions of it. So I studied that video, and then I recreated that software, and then added some extra features to it, and then sent them that and said, look, I can make the software that you have. I can add these extra features, and I can do it quickly, and I care. And then that got their attention. That's why they hired me. And it's an effective strategy. If you truly want to be, if you really want to be at a company, applying is really not a great way to be at a company. I mean, there's just so many applications. They all look the same. Who knows who's looking at it. So my advice, if you want to get hired at a company that you really want to be at, and you have to be qualified for it, though. If you're not qualified, no amount of guts or whatever is going to get you hired. But finding a non-traditional way to get the people who make the hiring decisions attention is a good way to get hired. Because otherwise you're playing a statistical game where you could be great and they could really like you. They don't interpret that from your resume. And then I mentioned I managed a lot of people. So from there, we hired more software engineers, and I started to manage the software team. And then as we grew and made more complex things, I managed the embedded team, then the electrical team. And then I was responsible for the end of Form 2 as a product. And then the Form 3 and Form 3L products, from specification requirement to delivering the machines, is my responsibility. So all the engineers working on that across all disciplines was my responsibility. So I kind of like worked my way up to that, and that's how I ended up managing so many people. Let's see. I know I'm over time. I'll probably cut it in, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. Let me see if there's any more. Here's an easy one. Do I have a PO box? No. I should. A lot of people keep telling me that I should. I just haven't done it, but it's in my list of things I need to do. Talking about Formlabs, someone was asking about the cost of owning a Form 3. This is Matt Chan. I guess I'll clear up some misconceptions. So he was asking what's the total cost of ownership of one. It looks great, but justifying the $150 resin, using it in 2 weeks of the shelf life, is it worth it? So the shelf life of the resin is more like a year, and it's not a cliff. I have resin that's really old, and it mostly works. There's some amount of diminished material properties or increased odds of failure, but I've definitely used resin that's much more than a year old. Seems to not be a problem. So the main cost of owning a Form 2 or Form 3 is there's the cost of the machine. For a Form 3, it's somewhere about $3,000, $3,500, something like that. There's the post-processing equipment, so you need to wash the parts. I highly recommend 2 stages where you have a dirty and a clean. It makes the isopropyl alcohol last significantly longer, and it'll pay off in some amount of time. And you just have better parts that are cleaner and less tacky. And then you need a curing station. If you're using any of the engineering materials, you have to irradiate them with heat, or irradiate them with more UV light and heat to fully realize the mechanical properties. And so you need those things. All in, it's probably about $5,000 for all the equipment. And then once you have that capital cost done, then the main expense is material, which is, the way I think about it is it's 15 to 25 cents per cubic centimeter. And for many parts, like this will end up costing, I don't know, $1 maybe. For this is the bipod for my pool cue that I'm talking about. For reasons I need a bipod. And the way I do the cost benefit is, how much time and material would it take for me to make this some other way? Like if this is $1 of material, or maybe $2, how much would this cost in material from McMaster? How much time would it take me? And for many, many parts, this comes out way ahead. Like if I buy, this is probably $2 worth of metal from McMaster, and then I've spent all the time making it. So it's really good. I mean, just the time savings are incredible, and the material cost is often a wash. The only time it's not really a wash is when you need to make something that's a solid brick, but you usually don't need to. You can core it out and make it quite light. I think the total cost of all the parts, which I need to show you all the parts, but they're upstairs, but all the parts for my pool table cue were about $30 or $40 worth of material total. And for me, I mean, I probably printed 50 or 60 parts. There's a lot of duplicates because there's 6, 12, or 24 of a lot of parts. So it saved me an insane amount of time by not having to machine these. So yeah, that's kind of the cost. 5,000 plus material use. I would buy one if it were me. I've gotten so much value out of them. Anytime I can, I print before machine. Could I live stream making a video? So I don't think it works. Me making a video, I'm so all over the place. I'm down here, I'm upstairs, I'm in the garage, constantly moving around those different workspaces for days and days and days. Like, I just don't see any way, unless I was wearing like a helmet cam, for me to actually stream making a video in any kind of coherent way. I get people who are working at just a bench in a small workshop being able to just have the camera and they talk while they're doing it. But for me, I'm so scatterbrained and so all over the place. It would not be coherent. It just wouldn't make any sense. And I think it would be a drag on me trying to do it. I think it'd be a big cost. I think the podcast or maybe a less work video where I just kind of compile a lot of footage of making a thing without a lot of editing or narrative. That might be the best way over live streaming. Yeah, an auto tracking gantry crane in the shop. So that's probably the first thing I'll do with the robotic arm from Tormach is put a camera on it. I don't know exactly what I'll do with it, but there's so many different neat shots that I've been wanting to try. The auto tracking gantry, I actually had a plan. This is, if you go into my Inventor, which is the CAD that I use, and you look in my different folders of projects, you will see multiple attempts over the years of me working on camera arm, which is essentially some kind of sky crane that could follow me around the shop. And every time I work on it, I'm like, oh, I can do this. And it's just so impractical. And especially, it's not just the building it, because I have a shop that has steel posts and columns like this thing. Those are a huge problem. But just I start to design it, and then I think through the UX. How do I tell this thing? Like, it'd be amazing if I had a remote and I'm like, look at this right here, and I click it and it comes and looks at that. But just like building all of that and all the software, oh my goodness. So I naively start working on it and then get discouraged and then stop. So I have a lot of CAD, but I've never made it. And then it still doesn't work because half my crap is upstairs anyway. At least half of my projects happen up in the EE/computer CAD office space, or in the shop with the plasma cutter and other smelly stuff. So yeah, I don't have a solution. All right, I think I'll do one more. Let's see if there's a good one. All right, I'm a fan of knowledge, so I'll answer this one. This is from Owen, and he was asking, do I have textbooks or books recommended for getting into mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, or books in general that I think are really useful? So there's many thoughts I have on this. It's a multi-part answer. For mechanical engineering, it's actually pretty hard to just pick up a book and get into it. There are certain aspects that you can learn about, but of all the stuff that I've learned, I've found mechanical engineering to be one of the most sequential development learning things there is. Like, in mechanical engineering, you have to learn, and this is just one of many paths that you take, calculus, physics, statics, which is the forces involved on structures that, they're kinematic. I don't know what it's a special class of structural loading. Solid mechanics, which is a more general class of structural loading. Then dynamics, which is those things moving. And then like machine design, which is putting all those things together. And so you can't just really dive into machine design, because you need to know all those steps before it to really be able to do it. And so my recommendation for getting into mechanical engineering, and this also applies to electrical engineering, is I would find an online course, like on Udacity or any of these places that have them, that has this progression. There may, in fact, I haven't looked, because I went to college, so I learned all this stuff by the forced progression, which I complained about the whole time, but it was very good looking back. But you may be able to find some condensed courses that build up from the math to the end thing, and you don't have to do 10 courses to get there. But I think you would have a very hard time just reading textbooks. Once you have the foundation, the calculus, the linear algebra, whatever it is you need, it's much easier to dive into books and learn. So that's thought one. Thought two, the longer I live in the 21st century, the more pro book I'm becoming. So I've put some of these thoughts in the Discord server, which is that I've noticed, and this is related to the civil discourse, there's a swirling whirlwind of thoughts going in my mind, but there's something about getting what you pay for and the cost of creating a communication. So a book, when you compare a book to a Reddit post or a book to a news article online or whatever, like a book, it's expensive for someone to make. They have to spend a lot of time writing it, developing the thoughts, and then paying to distribute it. So they have an incentive to make it good. And generally speaking, I found that books will significantly, just way better, develop a point or an argument or whatever it is they're talking about. Like when you read an engineering textbook, they usually start with the math and work all the way up to the concept. If I was reading a book on a social issue, they cite research, they develop the point, they talk about counterpoints and alternate theories, and then generally make some kind of claims. It's so different than bite-sized pieces. I don't think you will ever get from little bite-sized pieces on the internet what you can get from a book. Like I can read Wikipedia all day long, and I'm just not going to get out of Wikipedia what I could get out of a book. So I think they're very valuable, and I think my general thing that I'm thinking is I'm very wary of cheap information sources. Information sources where it's very inexpensive for someone to produce that information and distribute it. That like there's just no, like, why would I ever expect that to be high quality? There's no incentive really for it to be high quality. And this goes back to what I was saying about my videos. They're not cheap for me to make. And when I think about it globally, they're not cheap for people to consume. Like I said, a video is consuming multiple lifetimes of attention, so I better make it good. And I don't think that that's true for a lot of media today. And so just something to think about. I think books are great. And I read multiple books per week. They're great. So some books that I think are good. If you're in engineering, if you're in any kind of R&D development, there's a book called Peopleware. It explores the ideas of what it takes to make a group of creative people. They refer to them as thought workers. How do you get a team of people to do creative, innovative work in terms of environment, how you communicate, how, like, freedom, all that kind of stuff? Very good book. I've read that multiple times. A book I read a while back that's really good is Why Smart Executives Fail. Not everyone's an executive. I'm not an executive, but it's a bunch of case studies and interviews with people who had multi-billion-dollar screw-ups. You can learn a lot from failure. It's part of why I include failures in my videos. I think that they're as instructive, if not more instructive, than the final result. So that's a pretty interesting book. On the engineering side, the books that I reference a lot, I have a book called Instrumentation for Engineering Measurements. It's a super practical book on all the different instrumentation systems and real life pro cons, like signal to noise, frequency response, stuff like that. That's a really good one. It's by, I wrote this down, Daly, Riley, and McConnell. It's expensive, but it's a good one. Planning Algorithms. It's a robot motion planning algorithm book. It goes through, it's a little dated, doesn't have all the latest machine learning stuff, but it goes through all the planning algorithms, has pseudocode. If you're working on robots and you want to just see all different ways that you might solve a given problem, it's a really great place to start. It's the kind of book I've worked through a lot of the examples in it academically and on my free time, but like I'll flip through it sometimes and oh, that would solve this problem. It's useful. Another one is Real-Time Collision Detection. It's an orange book with a really cool looking cover. It just goes through, this is all computer science, but it's no nonsense. Here's different ways of doing collision detection with their different pros and cons and running time implications in C++ pseudocode. So it's really nice. And then the third one, or the final one, I don't know what number I'm on, that I highly recommend is catalogs. So I've been posting random pictures from my Grizzly catalog. It's a tome. I mean, it's it's probably 2 inches thick. It's spectacular, full color. I could look at that thing every time I eat for a really long time. But the thing that you'll find in catalogs is you will learn about things that exist that you had no idea that they existed. So when I look at a Misumi parts catalog for their linear motion systems, I'm seeing, oh, wow, there's this like special bracket that does this thing, or this adjustment knob, or this kind of linear track. Or when I'm looking at Grizzly, oh, look at this work holding thing or whatever. I had no idea that existed. And it helps you overcome the don't know what you don't know. And when you run into a problem in the future, you know that a thing or tool or whatever exists for your problem, and then you can go get it rather than building your own tool or using a substandard tool or something like that. So I recommend catalogs. I enjoy looking at them, so I'm a bit biased, but a lot of random things that I know about and throw out or use for practical building come from exposure to catalogs, honestly. So that's that. So I'm over time. There's a lot more questions. I got to figure out what I'm going to do with that. I'm failing on my 100% hit rate, but I might make the next one earlier. I'm not sure, but hopefully this is interesting. From my perspective, I always just feel like I'm rambling about stuff for an hour, which I don't not enjoy doing, but hopefully it's interesting. And as always, if you have feedback for how it could be better, let me know. And if you have more questions or follow-up stuff, you can post it in the chat. If you have follow-up questions on a thing I already talked about here, I'll reply in the chat. You don't need to wait till the next one, since there's already a thing that I already talked about. With that, happy, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? So happy evening, morning, wherever you're at. And I appreciate the questions. And thank you, of course, for supporting me. It is very helpful. It really does help get these things done with a lot less stress. Happy 1 a.m. Thank you for tuning in so late. I don't know what the ideal time is for this, so I just chose a time that was convenient for me. So have a good evening, and I have nothing else. So goodbye.